This is possibly the most famous statue in the Western world. It's called David, and it's by the Renaissance artist Michelangelo. He's portraying both a biblical and historical figure here, as well as what's considered the ideal human form. If Michelangelo had created his statue in the United States today, had he looked around for the average human form, his statue would look considerably different. Scientists have just said that we now live in what's called an obesogenic environment. That is a social and physical world that contributes to our unhealthy weight gain. This is not just a phenomenon restricted to the human population. It's also been seen in our domestic pets, our livestock, and our zoo animals, to the point where we are all unhealthy because of the amount of excess weight we carry. The obesity problem has been tracked across the U.S. for the last 50 years, and it's become such a health issue that it's been called the obesity epidemic, where we started with our population in the 1960s being about 10% unhealthily overweight, to now more than a third of all U.S. adults are considered obese. This was tracked by the Center for Disease Control in a telephone survey starting in 1984, and they created a map. And I want you to watch carefully what happens. You can see in 1984 they surveyed about a little less than half of all the states in the Union, and they found that that number, between 10 to 14% of the U.S. was considered obese. Watch how that changes over time. By 1997, a new category gets created where certain states have more than 20% of their population considered obese. In 2001, they create a new category, 25% of the population considered obese. Watch how that spread. In 4 years, a significant percentage of the United States is now considered obese. By 2014, that statistic changes considerably. So now what we can see here with a slightly different metric is that a few states in the Union have less than 20% of their population considered obese, where a significant number of the United States is now considered unhealthily overweight. This has been like no other health epidemic that we've been able to see in the United States. Now that we see what's happened, we're more than our... Here's another graphic representation of the obesity epidemic. And one thing to look at here is the number of people that are considered extremely obese. In 1960, that was a rare and unusual medical problem. Now, it's become relatively commonplace. How the Center for Disease Control measured the obesity epidemic is by using this thing called the body mass index, which is a simple height and weight chart to help people understand whether they're underweight, the ideal weight, or overweight. In 2014, we know that the obesity epidemic has stabilized and held strong in America, so that a significant percentage of our population's health and well-being will be threatened by the excess weight they're carrying. The problem has become such that even our cultural icons are carrying excess body weight to the point of being unhealthy. This is the body mass index, which you can see in your textbook on page 273, that puts these categories out: underweight, healthy, and overweight. You can look at your height on the left side and your weight across the top. This works for the average student and is a good measure of how healthy you're likely to be. It doesn't work well, though, if you're athletic, if you're tall or short, or for certain racial groups. You can look online for other BMI charts if you fit one of these categories to get a sense of your health relative to other people in your group. What the BMI is measuring is what's known as body composition. That is your lean body mass as compared to how much body fat you're carrying with you. Now there's two types of body fat. There's what's known as essential fat and storage fat. Essential fat is a problem if you're underweight because you need a certain amount of fat, particularly in your central nervous system and your brain, to maintain a healthy body. Storage fat is what's also called adipose tissue. How much storage fat you carry in your body is dependent on a variety of factors. The types of storage fat that we're concerned with are important. Brown fat is used for quick energy storage in our organs. Adipose tissue is primarily used as a way to pad and protect our bodies. And then abdominal fat, which is storage fat that was used in times of food scarcity, is strongly correlated with disease. Men and women have different health markers for their total body fat. And you can see that in general, women need higher amounts of fat in their body to be healthy, where men have higher muscle mass and a lower percentage of fats. Now, the Center for Disease Control has identified two major factors that contribute to our overweight population, and that is primarily an unhealthy diet and a sedentary lifestyle where we just don't get enough exercise. The weight balance equation is really straightforward. It's saying the amount of food we intake should be equal to the amount of energy we expend. And if we keep those two in relative balance, we'll maintain our weight. And food intake is measured in calories, as is energy expenditure, and we're all familiar with the calorie metric. Next week, we're going to talk about the fact that not all calories are equal, though. If you take in 100 calories of broccoli, that has a different physiological impact on your body than 100 calories of refined sugars or carbohydrates. And that's going to be important to understand when we talk about weight maintenance. What we now know is that in the United States of America, there are some significant health risks to carrying excess body fat. We know that life expectancy will be reduced. We also know that a number of medical problems such as cancer and organ issues, as well as type 2 diabetes, will all increase as our population ages with their excess body fat. Cancer is one of the real issues around the obesity epidemic, and we have now identified 25 to 30% of all major cancers, the ones that plague our population, can be related to carrying excess body mass. Why is that? It's because adipose tissue is not benign tissue. It controls the hormonal and regulates. We also have a problem in our nation with a surprising number of people, possibly in response to this obesogenic environment that we live in, who have issues with low body fat. And these can really impact things like our circulatory system and reproductive systems. And in fact, it was first seen in college athletes that were female who had abnormal eating patterns. They stopped menstruating, and then they began to age prematurely and showed signs of things like osteoporosis. We now know that eating disorders are a significant health issue for a percentage of the U.S. Binge eating, for example, is a problem that many of us are aware of, especially on campus, and that binge eating patterns often are related to our psychological state. Anorexia and bulimia are becoming increasingly problematic. 10% of college-aged women and maybe as many as 5% of college-aged men have these eating disorders. If you think you may have an eating disorder, it's important to understand how you could go about treating that. And the first way is to identify what type of eating disorder you have by talking to a doctor, a therapist, a psychiatrist. You want to look at how do you use food in your daily life, and how is that related to the management of your emotions. Maintaining a healthy body weight is really important to maintaining our overall health and well-being. Again, this class is focusing on the most important parts of health, which are good nutrition and dietary habits, adequate exercise, and dealing with stress in a productive, healthful way. If you do that, they will greatly aid your ability to maintain a reasonable body weight throughout your life. I appreciate you listening to this slide lecture, and I want you to think about your own body mass index and how it impacts your current state of health and wellness.